I'm Ms.Carmina. We're going to continue reading Cosmos and Psyche. It will be tagged here in the video if you want to check it out for yourself. It is on my green screen background, and it is also right here on my desk. We will continue reading the chapter that we started but didn't finish yesterday, titled Synchronicity and Its Implications. I will remind you that this is the third chapter in the second part which is titled In Search of a Deeper Order. So let's see where we left off. Right here. In essence, astrology seemed to offer a singularly valuable kind of insight into the dynamic activity of archetypes in human experience, indicating which ones were most operative in a specific instance, in what combinations, during which periods of time, and as part of what larger patterns. In providing such a perspective, this emerging development of the astrological tradition can be seen as essentially continuing a deeper and depth psychology project. Continuing and deepening the depth psychology project, namely to make conscious the unconscious, to help free the conscious self from being a puppet of the unconscious forces, as in acting out, projection, inflated identification, drawing towards one as fate, what is repressed or unconscious. Drawing towards one as fate, as what is repressed or unconscious, and so forth. Such an astrology appeared to possess a unique capacity for mediating a heightened level of communication and coordination between consciousness and the unconscious, with the unconscious now suggestive of considerably larger dimensions than originally conceived, less exclusively personal, less subjective, more cosmically embedded. It provided this mediation, however, not by spelling out anything in its literalistic predictive manner, but rather by disclosing intelligible patterns of meaning whose very nature and complexity, multivalence, indeterminacy, sensitivity to context and participation, and a seemingly improvisatory creativity, were precisely what made possible a dynamically co-creative role for human agency in participatory interaction with the archetypal forces and principles involved. Hey, everybody that's watching, everybody's welcome here. Welcome back, everybody that already knows me. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. All those things help me, help the algorithm promote my content and help me and my YouTube channel thrive. So, hi Kanu. So yeah, all your comments, I read them. I appreciate all your support and all your help. So go ahead and subscribe. I would love that. I would love to see everyone that's here today. I would love to see y'all today. Again, on another live. As the evidence involved pointed in this direction, as the evidence itself pointed in this direction, I eventually extended my research to encompass various categories of historical and cultural phenomena Compared with the psychotherapeutic data and biographical material involving non-famous individuals on which I initially had focused, the timing and character of historically significant events and biographical data of major cultural figures presented the advantage of being publicly verifiable, so that planetary correspondences were more open to rigorous evaluation. Beyond this methodological concern, the possibility that the larger historical process might itself possess some intrinsic order relative to planetary cycles and universal archetypes seems especially deserving of investigation. Evidence for such an order would obviously have serious implications in many fields: history, cosmology, philosophy, psychology, ethics, and religion. I therefore took the basic principles for which the earlier correlations had given support and began a systematic study in this larger domain of research. Together with many colleagues and students, I have now steadily pursued this research for 3 decades. What I have found far surpassed my expectations. Much remains a mystery, and certainly much will always remain a mystery. But I have become convinced, after the most painstaking investigation and critical assessment of which I am capable, that there does, in fact, exist a highly significant, indeed pervasive, correspondence between planetary movements and human affairs. And that the modern assumption to the contrary has been erroneous. The evidence suggests not that the planets themselves cause various events or character traits, but rather that a consistently meaningful empirical correspondence exists between the two sets of phenomena, astronomical and human, with a connecting principle most fruitfully approached as some form of archetypally informed synchronicity. Archetypally informed synchronicity. I'm gonna highlight that twice. Hello, Jamie. Welcome. Hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up, please. In the following chapters, I set forth several of the major categories of evidence with which I personally have been concerned, and I discussed their broader implications. I have striven to present this material to readers new to the field in such a way that it is at once readily comprehensible, manageable in size, and representative of the whole, even though the accumulated evidence from which the present sampling is drawn comprises many thousands of meticulously analyzed correlations. This larger body of research has been the subject of many lecture courses and seminars that I have taught over the past decade in graduate programs in psychology, philosophy, and cultural history. A systematic treatment of this research will require more than a single book. Yet, it seemed desirable to set forth first a preliminary survey of evidence that would give the interested reader a general sense of the nature of observed correspondences. Many critics will, of course, object to the entire project of this book. Anything astrological, they will say, must be both simplistic and absurd. Having once held that opinion myself, I now believe that such a discriminate rejection is virtually always based on personal and cultural prejudice, rather than conscientious inquiry. I can sympathize with such a prejudice, and I appreciate its background. For myself, however, a sustained examination of the evidence has been decisive. I believe that the open-minded reader who sincerely seeks to discover the potential validity and value of this perspective and method of analysis, and who carefully examines the evidence, above all, the evidence pertaining to his or her own life and fields of personal expertise, which that person is especially able to assess, will be impressed as I continue to be with the striking character and precision of the correlations. The method of analysis described in the following chapters is highly democratic. It is not unlike the telescope of Galileo's time, through which many interested person could observe the new body of evidence supporting the Copernican hypothesis. Every reader with a modest degree of preparation can take the principles set forth in this book, focus on those experiences and events that are most personally significant to his or her life, and determine the archetypal astrological understanding and determine whether the archetypal astrological understanding offers a larger perspective, sheds new light, brings deeper meaning, provides greater intelligibility. To help the reader make an informed judgment on these matters is one of the principal purposes of this book. In the following chapters, therefore, I present both the basic technical knowledge necessary to begin the exploration and illustrative examples of correlations in history and in the lives of significant cultural figures. These examples are presented as information perhaps interesting and instructive in itself, but also as an aid in developing or awakening what Hillman has called an archetypal eye. I think I painted my skirt. An archetypal eye, that form of imaginative intelligence, implicit and potential in all of us, that is capable of recognizing and discriminating the rich multiplicity of archetypal patterns in the intimate microcosm of one's own life, as well as in the great events of history and culture. After this survey of evidence, I briefly address its implications and suggest a philosophical and cosmological framework within which it might most cogently be integrated. And that's the end. But should I begin the next part of the book? I think I will begin the next part of the book. This part is called Part 3, Through the Archetypal Telescope. See here? Part 3, Through the Archetypal Telescope. And the quote says, "My guide and I entered through that hidden path to make our way back into the shining world, and with no time for rest, we climbed upward, he first, I following, until, through a round opening, I saw those things of beauty that heaven holds. It was thence, at last, we came forth to see again the stars." And this is Dante, the Divine Comedy. The evolving tradition. Okay, the evolving tradition. Astrology, in its most general definition, rests as a conception of the cosmos. Astrology, in its most general definition, rests on a conception of the cosmos as a coherent embodiment of creative intelligence, purpose, and meaning, expressed through a constant complex correspondence between astronomical patterns and human experience. The various celestial bodies are regarded as possessing an intrinsic association with specific universal principles. Excuse me. Both these principles and their astronomical correspondences are seen as ultimately grounded in the nature of the cosmos itself, thereby integrating the celestial and terrestrial, microcosm and microcosm. As the planets move through their cycles, they form various geometrical relationships with each other relative to the Earth within the larger cosmic environment. These alignments are observed to coincide with specific archetypally patterned phenomena in human lives. From the beginning of Western astrology, such an understanding was closely associated with the original Greek conception of cosmos with a K, a word first applied to the world as a whole by the Pythagoreans to convey a characteristically Greek synthesis of intelligent order, beauty, and structural perfection. The astrological tradition, initiated by the Greeks in Alexandria in the Hellenistic era during the centuries immediately before and after the birth of Christ, was embedded in a classical world conception deeply influenced by Pythagorean and Platonic thought. It had earlier roots in ancient Mesopotamian celestial observations from at least the beginning of the second millennium BCE, and was shaped by ancient Babylonian, Egyptian, and Persian cultural influences. The first known natal chart, or horoscope, dates from about 400 before the Common Era, the time of Socrates and Plato. The astrological perspective and method that emerged in the following centuries was closely associated with the scientific principles of Greek astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, with the esoteric streams of thought that informed the mystery religions and hermetic literature of classic antiquity, and with major philosophical and religious movements such as Neoplatonism, Aristotelianism, Stoicism, and Gnosticism. As an overarching view of the universe and the cosmic position of the human being, astrology was singularly pervasive in the classical era. It transcended the boundaries of science, religion, and philosophy. It subsequently influenced Christians, Islamic, and Jewish thought, and played a central role in the art, literature, and cultural ethos of the European High Middle Ages and Renaissance. Because of this extraordinary diversity in its origins and the succession of its later environments, astrology was constantly being reconceived according to the different intellectual and cultural contexts in which it flourished. It's very interesting. Let me see how many pages I have left yet. The High Middle Ages and Renaissance, because of... Oh, I already finished that. What? And cultural ethos of the European Middle Ages and Renaissance. Because of this extraordinary diversity in its origins and succession in its later environments, astrology was constantly being reconceived according to the different intellectual and cultural contexts in which it flourished. That's interesting. Astrology was constantly being reconceived according to the different intellectual and cultural contexts in which it flourished. Yet, at the heart of all these various inflections, the implicit cosmological metastructure within which the Western astrological tradition developed can be described as essentially Pythagorean, Platonic in character. That is, the cosmos is understood to be pervasively informed and integrated through the active presence of a universal ordering principle, at once mathematical and archetypal, in manifestation. Thereby, the celestial bodies and their cyclical patterns possess a symbolic significance that is intelligibly reflected within the human sphere. Over the centuries, diverse schools, interpretations, and frameworks arose that continually reshaped and transformed this underlying perspective, positing different views concerning the nature and extent of cosmic influence, the relative balance of celestial constraints, and human freedom. The question as to whether planets are indications or causes, and in the case of the long influential Aristotelian Ptolemaic model, the possibility of a more physically causal determinism produced by the celestial spheres. From its Mesopotamian and Egyptian origins to its subsequent Hellenistic synthesis in the classical era, the history of Western astrology can, in very general terms, be seen as having moved from a more fluid astral divination focused on intuiting the will of the celestial gods and corresponding to this perception through appropriate action, ritual, and supplication for divine favor, to an increasing emphasis on systematic observation of the geometric regularities of astronomical movements, the application of universal principles of interpretation, and eventually the formulation of elaborate rules for concrete prediction. This gradual process of rationalization, in Weber's sense, was combined in later antiquity and the medieval period with an increasingly mechanistic view of celestial causality, which in turn became linked with a more rigid determinism. A similar evolution took place in India after the conquest of Alexander the Great brought Greek culture to Asia. Vedic astrology was shaped both by the Mesopotamian Hellenistic tradition and by India's own distinctive religious and social legacies in a manner that has continued to the present. In Europe, in the wake of the Enlightenment of the late 17th and 18th centuries, astrology virtually disappeared from scholarly discourse and the worldview of the educated, lingering principally in the form of popular astrological almanacs. It underwent a gradual revival during the 19th century with the growing European interest during the Romantic period in esoteric traditions and later in theosophy. Finally, in the course of the 20th century, a widespread rebirth of astrology took place, beginning in England and spreading through North America and the rest of Europe. The astrology that emerged was informed by goals and theoretical assumptions that often differed from those of the ancient and medieval periods in fundamental ways. In general, its character was more individualistic and psychological, emphasizing internal reality over external, self-understanding over concrete event prediction, symbolic interpretation over literal, and participatory engagement over passive fatalism. Accompanying this shift of character has been a gradual rise within the astrological community of a discourse of critical philosophical reflection and questioning of many traditional astrological assumptions and tenets. Alright, I definitely still have time, so I will continue reading, but I need to drink water. Numerous factors have played a role in this recent trend. Increased access to precise astrological data and the discovery of the outer planets have deeply affected astrological practice and theory. So also has the enormous increase in available data, with incomparably more individual birth charts, biographies, and historical periods having now become the basis of a collaborative development of accepted principles of interpretation. No less important have been broader cultural changes affecting general intellectual presuppositions and the modern psychological character. These changes include a larger commitment to and experience of individual autonomy, a deepened sense of interiority, and the value of psychological reflection, a more complex grasp of symbolic cognition and interpretive multivalence, a more critical understanding of the mutual implications of inner and outer realities, and a deeper recognition of the participatory character of human experience. Associated with this shift is also an increased awareness of multidimensional and multi-causal nature of all phenomena, combined with an appreciation of the irreducible indeterminacy of life's unfolding. Indeed. Thank you, everybody that's joining me. Thank you for reading with me. I love y'all. The widespread emergence of a more psychologically sophisticated astrology in the second half of the 20th century, with Jung and with Jung and Dane Rudyard, the key figures, present the dominant historical trend. But an important peripheral development at this time was a new interest from outside the field in statistical tests of astrological hypotheses. Of these, the most significant were the massive studies conducted by the French statisticians Michel and François Gauquelin over a 40-year period beginning in the 1950s. The widely discussed Mars effect, first observed by the Gauquelins and since replicated by other research groups, demonstrated a highly significant statistical correlation of Mars located on either the eastern horizon or the zenith of the birth of in either the eastern horizon or the zenith at the birth of of prominent athletes. Similar, that's funny. The Mars effect. Prominent athletes. Similar correlations with planetary position were found at the birth of eminent leaders in other fields. Saturn for scientists, Jupiter for politicians, and the Moon for writers, all correctly corresponding to the traditional astrological principles and character traits associated with those particular celestial bodies. In 1982, after extensive examination of the Gauquelin research, Hans Eysenck, a prominent academic psychologist unsympathetic to astrology and famous for his criticism of psychoanalysis for its lack of statistical support, published with his co-author David Nias a summary of their conclusions. Quote, "We feel obliged to admit that there is something here that requires explanation. However much it may go against the grain, other scientists who take the trouble to examine the evidence may eventually be forced to a similar conclusion. The findings are inexplicable, but they are also factual, and as such can no longer be ignored. They cannot just be wished away because they are unpalatable or not in accord with the laws of present-day science. Perhaps the time has come to state quite unequivocally that a new science is in process of being born." Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to finish, I'm going to read one more paragraph. And then, because I won't finish this, I may finish the whole chapter. I may finish the whole chapter, okay? Just let me drink a little bit of water. It's frustrating when I can't finish this chapter, so I'm happy to finish the chapter. The positive results of the Guaquilin studies and their replication by others presented a robust challenge on science's own terms to the scientific dismissal of astrology. Yet, paradoxically, statistical studies have added relatively little to astrological understanding, and they appear to be methodologically inadequate for entering into the archetypal frame of reference central to the astrological tradition. The larger resurgence of astrology during these decades has continued to be qualitative rather than quantitative in its practice and research, reflecting its sources in the Western astrological tradition and contemporary depth psychology rather than experimental science and behaviorism. Common to the two approaches, however, has been the underlying impulse in the past half-century from both within and outside of the astrological discipline that has moved astrology into a more direct engagement with the mainstream modern worldview. All right, y'all. We're going to finish the chapter, but I feel like I do have my legs up on the chair, but I feel kind of far away from y'all. I don't know if you can hear me well. I feel dunked all the way down here. I'm gonna stay comfortable, but I'm trying to make sure y'all can hear me. Okay, so causality and correlation. In the modern era, with the dominant Cartesian Newtonian paradigm in the background of all thought and discourse on the subject, considerable confusion has been produced by the conventional scientific attempt to interpret and thus reject the possibility of astrological correspondences within a modern mechanistic cosmological framework. In effect, the Cartesian Newtonian standpoint led to a single simple question that, within the framework, was regarded as decisive for the issue of astrology's validity. How can the planets influence events on Earth if no physical forces have been observed that could cause those events? This question was so defining for the mainstream scientific mind that even well-replicated statistical evidence that supported astrological tenets could not affect the intensity of its resistance. To a great extent, the question of physical planetary influence reflected the residual strength of materialism and mechanistic assumptions in contemporary scientific thought, even after the conceptual shifts introduced by quantum physics. I read a book about that, Alice in Quantum Land. It's on my live. It's one of the live podcasts. I invite y'all to check it out. See if I can pin it here, maybe, if I have time. Physical forces represented the only kind of relationship that could be imagined to exist between celestial bodies and human life. This approach to astrology also, less obviously, reflected certain lingering literalists and mechanistic tendencies in the astrological tradition itself that made it vulnerable to a reductionist critique after the ancient Ptolemaic Aristotelian cosmology was rejected and replaced by Newtonian science. Above all, however, the modern dismissal of astrology reflected the virtually universal modern conviction that the cosmos was disenchanted. The disenchanted cosmos. Given the nature of the evidence now known, it is difficult to imagine any physical factor that could serve as the ultimate source or medium of the observed astrological correlations. At least on the basis of the principal categories of data I have examined, it seems to me highly unlikely that the planets send out physical emanations like electromagnetic radiation that casually influence events in human life in a mechanistic way so as to produce the observed correlations. The range of correspondences between planetary positions and human existence is just too vast and multidimensional. It's no easy thing. It's no easy answer. I agree. Too manifestly ordered by structures of meaning, too suggestive of creative intelligence, too vividly informed by aesthetic patterning, too metaphorically multivalent, too experientially complex and nuanced, and too responsive to human participatory inflection to be explained by straightforward material factors alone. Given as well the consistent nature of Mercury and Venus to Neptune and Pluto, irrespective of their size or distance from Earth, any casual factor resembling gravitational influence seems to be equally improbable. I believe that more plausible and comprehensive explanation of the available evidence would rest on a conception of the universe as a fundamentally and irreducibly interconnected whole, informed by creative intelligence and pervaded by patterns of meaning pervaded by patterns of meaning and order that extend through every level and that are expressed through a constant correspondence between astrological events and human events. Such a view is consistently reflected in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. As above, so below, as within, so without, which describes a universe all of whose parts and dimensions are integrated into an intelligible whole. In the perspective I am suggesting here, reflecting the dominant trend in contemporary astrological theory, the planets do not cause specific events any more than the hands on a clock cause a specific time. Rather, the planetary positions are indicative of the cosmic state of archetypal dynamics at that time. The words of Plotinus, the most influential philosopher of later classical antiquity, speak directly to this understanding, where Plotinus says, quote, the stars are like letters which inscribe themselves at every moment in the sky. Everything in the world is full of signs. All events are coordinated, and all things depend on each other. As has been said, everything breathes together. That's so cool. That's why y'all are reading with me and we're reading together. From California, where I am, to wherever you all are. Here. Instead of the linear causal mechanisms of matter and force assumed in a Newtonian universe, the continuous meaning coincidence between celestial patterns and human affairs seems rather to reflect fundamental underlying unity and correspondence between the two realms, macrocosm and microcosm, celestial and terrestrial, and thus the intelligent coherence of a living, fully animate cosmos. The postulation of a systematic The postulation of a systematic correspondence of this kind implies a universe in which mind and matter, psyche and cosmos, are more pervasively related or radically united than has been assumed in the modern worldview. As for the relevance of causality and understanding astrological correlations, Raj, you're funny. As for the relevance of causality in understanding astrological correlations, it seems, excuse me, it seems that a fundamental new kind of causality must be posited to account for the observed phenomena, rather than anything resembling the linear mechanistic causality of the conventional modern understanding. What is suggested by the evidence is an archetypal causality that is crucial that in crucial respects possesses Platonic and Aristotelian characteristics, yet it is far more complex, fluid, multivalent, and co-creatively participatory than previous conceptual models, whether from physics, philosophy, or astrology, have been able to accommodate. Free will and determinism. Because the question of free will and determinism has long been the most existentially and spiritually critical issue in all discussions of astrology, I will offer a few preliminary remarks here. There is no question that a substantial part of the Western astrological tradition supported a relatively deterministic interpretation of cosmic influence, a tendency even more marked in Indian astrology. This is true. For numerous schools and theorists of ancient and medieval astrology, the horoscope revealed a person's destined fate, and the celestial powers governed human lives with a more or less rigid sovereignty. The widespread reemergence of Western astrology in the course of the 20th century, however, arising in a new context at a different stage of the West's cultural and psychological evolution, brought with it a deep transformed vision of both human self and nature and the nature of astrological prediction. The most characteristic attitude among contemporary astrologers holds astrological knowledge to be ultimately emancipatory rather than constricting, bringing a potential increase of personal freedom and fulfillment through the enlarged understanding of the self and its cosmic content. Oh, I said content. Bringing a potential increase of personal freedom and fulfillment through an enlarged understanding of the self in its cosmic context. Yeah, I did it. In this view, knowing the basic archetypal dynamics and patterns of meaning in one's birth chart allows one to bring greater awareness to the task of fulfilling one's authentic nature and intrinsic potential. As in Jung's concept of individuation, the more accurately one understands the archetypal forces that inform and affect one's life, the more flexibility and intelligently responsive one can be in dealing with them. To the extent that one is unconscious of these potent and sometimes highly problematic forces, one is more or less a pawn of the archetypes, acting according to unconscious motivations with a little possibility of being a co-creative participant in the unfolding and refining of those potentials. Cosmos and Psyche. Raj, it's in the background. And I will pin it to this video. It's also pinned to the previous lives I've done. But yeah, I haven't done anything to this video because I come in here in a rush. I just want to read, and I'll fix the video information later. Where did I leave off? Okay. Thank you. Stick around, subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Everything helps. Thanks for chatting. To the extent that one is unconscious of these potent, sometimes highly problematic forces, one is more or less a pawn of the archetypes, acting according to unconscious motivations with little possibility of being a co-creative participant in the unfolding and refining of those potentials. Archetypal awareness brings greater self-awareness and thus greater personal autonomy. Again, this is the basic rationale for depth psychology. From Freud and Jung onward, to release oneself from the bondage of blind action and unconsciously motivated experience, to recognize and explore the deeper forces in the human psyche and thereby modulate and transform them. On the individual level, astrology is valued for its capacity to articulate which archetypes are especially important for each person, how they interact with each other, and when they are most likely to be activated in the course of each life. But in addition to the psychological evolution of the modern self, with its increased sense of dynamic autonomy and self-reflective interiority, perhaps the most significant factor in the emerging emancipatory understanding of astrology is a deepening grasp of the nature of the archetypal principles themselves, the subject to which we now turn. Yay! Archetypal principles is next, but that's for tomorrow because my lunch is over. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the live. Thanks for joining me on the replay. For you're on the replay, I love you. Take care, readers and scholars. I'll see you.